the capacity to adapt to uncertainty and to be resilient in the face of challenge, especially in the age of the internet and now increasingly in the age of AI, is one of the greatest tasks that a leader has. Neuroplasticity is the capacity for the brain to change and adapt. That what worked yesterday won't necessarily work today or tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think that capacity to be flexible and adaptable is central to great leadership in the 21st century and beyond. And so if you have a tool, a modality like psychedelics or even like microdosing that helps to facilitate that adaptability, then I think it makes sense to be able to use it in a really skillful way that helps you to reflect, learn from that reflection, grow from that reflection, and actually shift and change who you are.
Welcome, everyone, to the Eons Ahead podcast. I'm your host, Alex Wolfe. And on the show, we like to have deep, intimate conversations with amazing people that are eons ahead. But what does it mean to be eons ahead? Well, it means they're ahead of their time and they see things other people don't see, and they're able to communicate these visions to the world, manifesting them into reality, making a positive impact for humanity. They're often simply doing things that other people are not doing. And I love that. They're trailblazers, they're pioneers, they're leaders in their space. And our guest today is definitely all of the above. His name is Paul Austin. He's a friend and he's an entrepreneur, an educator, a leading voice in modern psychedelic movement. As the founder of Third Wave, he has played a pivotal role in shaping the conversation around the responsible use of psychedelics for personal growth, health, and leadership. Through Third Wave's educational platform, practitioner training programs, and community-driven initiatives, Paul is dedicated to bridging the gap between the psychedelic science and practical application. His work explores the intersection of psychedelics, longevity, neuroplasticity, and conscious living, helping individuals and professionals integrate transformative tools into their lives and work. He's eons ahead. He's here today, Paul Austin.
Thanks, Alex. It's good to be across from you. As someone who hosts a podcast myself, I'm impressed that you had memorized that entire first half of the introduction, and it was beautifully said. I think that play on words of being eons ahead is perfect for the brand and the podcast and everything you're doing. So, thanks for having me on the show. It's good to be here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I would have memorized your bio as well. I like doing that.
I sent it a little last minute.
A little
I sent
last
it, like,
minute, so I didn't want
this
to mess it
morning,
up.
basically.
Yeah. But thank you for being here. I'm excited about this conversation. You know, when we first met, it was on some pretty cool circumstances. We were fortunate enough to be on the first panel for psychedelics for mental health at the Concordia Summit, world stage in front of a bunch of politicians and policymakers and change makers. And yeah, that was really cool for us to share that space. And you did a wonderful job moderating and asked some great questions that brought out some gems in me. And I hope to return the favor here today and bring some gems out of you, Paul.
Yeah, that was it was an interesting platform to be on. That was September 2022, so
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. What I remember most from that is I was after the panel and our talk. I was standing out in the hallway and the elevator opened and the Queen of Jordan walked out, and I was just sort of mesmerized by her. And even when we were up on the panel up on stage, I remember looking out and, like, you know, the former president of Uruguay is there, the former president of Spain was there, and I said something during the panel, and a lawyer kind of friend who was also has an interest in the psychedelic space came up to me afterwards, and he's like, "What you said should not be said in, like, a sort of polite society," you know? And I was like, "Well, that's kind of why I'm here, you know? You gotta speak the truth in some of these areas, because a lot of these people who are interested in psychedelics for mental health, you know, they don't recognize how intertwined it is with things like the drug war, which we talked a little bit about, and just general sort of cognitive liberty and consciousness. And so this has been, you know, my work the last 10 years is helping to elevate this conversation and, you know, the power of microdosing to help create a bridge for folks who are interested and curious, but maybe not sure of the first step to take to experience some of the benefits of these medicines.
Yeah, I love that. And bring up a couple of things there that I want to touch on. So one is bridging the gap.
Mhm.
right? And you've done a wonderful job of this over your career of having these conversations, elevating the consciousness for people to start to understand and bridge the gap over into the mainstream. So, how do you see that going as we progress? And what are you doing now to continue to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so Third Wave, I started as an educational platform in 2015, so 10 years ago now. And at that point in time, I had a lot of people in my life, family, friends, colleagues, who thought it was clinically insane for openly talking about psychedelics and microdosing in particular. It was very nascent and new. You had folks like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss who were starting to publish podcasts about the topic. There were several states that had legalized cannabis at this point in time, and a number of research institutions like Johns Hopkins and NYU that were publishing really strong research on the efficacy of psilocybin, but it was still really, really early days. Anything prior to Michael Pollan in 2018 and the publication of How to Change Your Mind was sort of early days in the psychedelic space. Now, in those 10 years, we've seen this massive growth of interest and use. So 61% of Americans now support legal psychedelic therapy. In 2023, 8 million Americans took psilocybin mushrooms. 4 million of those were microdosing. And from 2019 to 2023, the number of Americans who took a psychedelic quadrupled.
Nice.
So in increased by 4x. And that was largely driven by the pandemic. People stuck at home in isolation and the rise of telemedicine ketamine.
Mm.
Companies like Mindbloom and Better You and Joyous and there are several others in that space where all of a sudden you could deliver ketamine to someone's home and they could
Mhm.
work with it. But I think a lot of that was driven by microdosing.
Mhm.
And what I noticed early on is that people who were curious about psychedelics, if you told them, okay, you can either not do this at all, or you can take 3 or 4 or 5 grams of mushrooms, to them, the risk of having a potential bad trip or difficult experience or something happening that, just doesn't go so well, it wasn't worth the leap, so to say. But if you got someone to say, okay, I could take 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams or, a half gram of mushrooms and just start that way, then that starts to open some conversations and some doors. And I even noticed this with my dad is a really good example of this. My dad, um, never been drunk, doesn't smoke, very, pious Christian man, never smoked weed, not into any of that stuff.
Mhm.
But when I started to get into psychedelics, we have this relationship where he sends me a book to read, I send him a book to read. And so I sent him Michael Pollan's new book, How to Change Your Mind. This was in 2018. He read it, became more open to the idea of psychedelics, started to microdose. And then in 2019, I guided him through his first high dose psilocybin journey. So I
Mhm.
think the capacity for microdosing to be that bridge is really important. And
Mhm.
I think the two biggest drivers of adoption in the quote unquote mainstream at this point in time have been microdosing and telemedicine ketamine.
Mm.
That's sort of what I've noticed. And so bridging that gap just allows people to have access to medicines that work and are effective and useful,
Mhm.
that are ideally medicines they can grow at home. Something like, with psilocybin mushrooms. I mean, on Third Wave, we sell a mushroom grow kit where anyone could just buy a grow kit. And within 6 weeks, you can have, enough mushrooms to last you a very long time. So that capacity to like empower people, I think is a really important aspect of bridging the gap.
Very cool. I'm gonna get one of those grow kits. Um, so do you think it's really just the fact that it's so micro, the micro dose is so small, so people, the mainstream people like your dad that have, maybe never done drugs or psychedelics, they're just like, well, it's so micro, there's not gonna be this hallucinogenic trip out journey or whatever words we want to put on that. And it's just this is the entry point. This is the gap that it's bridging the microdosing.
Well, the early clinical research on microdosing shows that it's helpful for three things. So mood,
Mhm.
energy, and sleep.
Mhm.
And so I think the fact that microdosing is what I would call sub-intoxicating meaning when you microdose, it's not impacting you to the degree that you can't go about your every normal day life. You're not having visual hallucinations. Typically you're not having very deep emotional catharsis. It's a bit more subtle, and
Mm,
people appreciate that. The metaphor that I often use to describe our relationship to microdosing is when we learned how to swim when we were 3 or 4 or 5. Most of us, if we had good parents, we were put in the shallow end first. We had a swim instructor. We had these, swimmies on the inflatable things that allowed us to float. Most of our parents, and I'm sorry for any parents that did do this, but most of our parents did not just throw us in the deep end and say,
right,
figure it out.
right.
And I feel like that's what we do with psychedelics, or have done with psychedelics, is we say, we're just going to throw you in the deep end of your consciousness.
Mhm.
You don't have a lot of preparation for what you might confront or approach, but good luck.
Mhm.
And I think that has great potential upside, as we've seen in the clinical research, and as I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast have experienced themselves. But it comes also with a fair amount of risk, because if that experience doesn't go well, it could potentially be traumatizing
Right.
for someone.
Yeah.
And I think the other consideration as part of this is, when you're working with very high doses of psychedelics, it is ideal to have a guide or facilitator that is with you.
Totally.
And right now we're still in the sort of wild west of psychedelics, where it's hard for folks who are new to this to discern who is a good guide. Like, who
Mhm.
can I trust to be in the space with? And so with microdosing, it basically empowers someone. They don't really need a guide present.
Mhm.
It helps to have a friend or maybe a coach that helps you to get the dosage right and sort of calibrate it. But you don't need a physical person who is present with you for 6 hours.
Mhm.
And so you can just sort of experiment and trial and error and sort of get a sense for, okay, this is how it feels. This is what I'm noticing. And if you do it consistently, 3, 4 times a week, that's what a lot of the protocols ask for with microdosing. If you do it 3 to 4 times a week over the span of a month, the majority of people start to notice some substantial shifts and benefits after that month.
Yeah.
And I think that's also the important aspect of this, is we are a people, especially Americans, who have been conditioned to want immediate gratification.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I've noticed when coaching people or having people in our courses and programs, is you really have to set this expectation of, it might take a month for you to start to see some substantial shifts and benefits. But if you commit to that month,
Mhm.
if you do it consistently over that month, time and time again, people will notice, oh, wow, I'm waking up with more energy. I have more vitality.
Mhm.
My mood is much better. Because my mood is much better, I'm more active. I'm more social. I'm getting better sleep at night. And I think these are tremendous benefits that all of us could really yeah, work with. Like, who doesn't want to have more energy or a better mood or get better sleep? That's like, these are like common human things that we all desire
Yeah,
in our lives.
fundamentals.
Yeah.
Besides these fundamentals, which are so key and so essential, and you've been working with microdosing for quite some time now, Paul.
10 years.
10 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
substantial amount of time. Um, can you talk into some of the other benefits that you've seen? I'm sure there's plenty, but most of my listeners and viewers probably familiar with microdosing or starting to toy with the idea of it. But yeah, can you talk to some other benefits that you've seen typically?
Yeah. So the two biggest benefits that I focus on are neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
So the capacity for the brain to be malleable, the capacity to develop more gray matter, the capacity to learn new things.
Hmm.
That even at lower doses, psychedelics are helping to activate something called BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor, which is a precursor to neuroplasticity. And so it's sort of like fertilizer for your brain.
Mm.
And so when that neuroplasticity comes online, all of a sudden it becomes easier to shift and change our behaviors. It becomes easier to commit to a meditation practice, or
Mm.
commit to going to the gym more consistently, or shifting our diet or stopping smoking. Right, these behavioral changes become much more possible.
Mhm.
And so that benefit is, I think, a lot of why microdosing is so useful for people. And what we tell people is, microdosing is not a magic pill,
Mhm.
that it is a modality, it is a tool but a lot of it is what you do with it. And so
Mhm.
we encourage people that when you are microdosing, how do you leverage that window of neuroplasticity to establish new behaviors that may be beneficial in the long term?
Mhm.
And so we encourage people to start a meditation practice, or to start going for more walks, or to have difficult conversations with spouse or business partners, or go to the sauna and cold plunge, or there's lots of ways that you can work with that neuroplasticity to live a better life.
Mhm.
And so that's where I think a lot of the even coaching elements come in around microdosing, that working with a coach or practitioner um, to improve your overall quality of life, utilizing microdosing as a catalyst
Mhm.
for those changes. So neuroplasticity is a big one, and then the fear extinction.
Mm.
So courage,
Mhm.
basically, right? We know from clinical research that when we take even low doses of psychedelics, they impact the amygdala,
Mhm.
and the amygdala is a tiny almond
Hmm.
sized thing that's deep in our brain. It's what's called the reptilian brain. It's the
Mhm.
oldest part of our brain, and that's where our fear response comes from. That's
Mhm.
that's like our fight or flight response. That's what
Mhm.
keeps us alive in difficult times. But in today's world, that fear response can often be overwhelming,
Mhm.
and it can prevent us from doing the things that we know we actually have to do to succeed,
Mhm.
or to be healthier, or to live a better, more aligned life. And so when we work with psychedelics, even at these lower doses, on a neurobiological level, they downregulate that fear response.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, these things that we might have been hesitant to do, or procrastinated on, or just felt like, man, I don't know if I can handle that conversation. I don't know if I can put myself out there like that. When we start to microdose, it creates this space where you start to believe in yourself a little
Mhm.
bit more. You start to take a few more risks. And I think that capacity to be courageous
Mhm.
is where I notice a lot of the big shifts and changes come from, because people all of a sudden are willing to take risks and do new things that they wouldn't have normally done
Mhm.
before. Now, how that plays out from an outcome perspective, we talked about mood, energy, and sleep, but then there's other things like a lot of folks will be looking to microdoses to help wean off certain psychiatric medications like Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft. The most common one that folks wean off of is antidepressants.
Mhm.
What I always advise, I think it's an important point to make here, is if someone is on an SSRI and they want to wean off of it with the support of psychedelics or microdosing, ketamine is a great first option.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is ketamine has a very different, um, it interacts with the brain differently than the classic psychedelics. And so there's no sort of concern or worry about doing ketamine if you're on a certain SSRI.
Mhm.
And then potentially microdosing to help further wean off.
Mhm.
And a lot of folks who have been on antidepressants will use microdosing as a prophylactic,
Mhm.
which means essentially they'll continue to microdose so the depression doesn't come back. So it becomes a new antidepressant. It can for some
Mhm.
folks, but from what we've seen, it's a much healthier antidepressant than the classic SSRIs.
Mhm.
And so, but if someone is to do that, they should do so under the guidance of a psychiatric professional. That could be a psychiatrist, it could be a nurse practitioner, it could be a clinical therapist, but they should do so under the guidance of someone who really knows that lane,
Mhm.
because there can be some challenges and tricks going on. And then the other sort of main use case for microdosing is for like performance and health.
Mhm.
So one of my sort of pet hypotheses about microdosing is that we know from some clinical research at LSU that psychedelics are anti-inflammatory.
Mhm.
And as your listeners may know, and I'm sure you're well aware of, a lot of disease, a lot of biological issues comes from chronic inflammation.
Mhm.
And so it looks like psychedelics could be a really great tool to help address acute and chronic inflammation. And so
Mhm.
my hypothesis is that when we start to microdose,
Mhm.
and we're taking a microdose consistently,
Psilocybin?
psilocybin. This is also true. San Pedro is actually, it has the greatest potential for anti-inflammatory
Mm.
use.
Wonderful.
Psilocybin and LSD are anti-inflammatory, but San Pedro, there's something there that the other substances aren't quite as effective at.
Mhm.
But when we consistently microdose, 90% of our serotonin is in our gut,
Mhm.
and psychedelics are serotonin agonists. They activate serotonin. It helps to reduce sort of inflammation in our gut, and then through our vagus nerve, that's communicated to our brain. And it's sort of like two sides of the same coin. It helps to reduce inflammation in the brain, which helps to increase neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So these are sort of these are very similar pathways that they're working on. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that capacity to be anti-inflammatory is why microdosing is a really great tool, and we're seeing and noticing a lot of sort of broad benefits
Mm-hmm.
around it.
Mm-hmm.
And a mentor of mine, Jim Fadiman, who's sort of like the godfather of microdosing, he just came out with a new book on microdosing. He talks a lot about how, just like diet, exercise, and sleep are essential. And when you eat healthier, it addresses a lot of issues. When you exercise more, it addresses a lot of issues. When you sleep more, it addresses a lot of issues. There
Mm-hmm.
seems to be something going on with microdosing in that way as well.
Mm.
And my belief is that the reason we're seeing this sort of systemic benefit of microdosing for a lot of different things is because of its impact on inflammation in particular.
Makes sense. Inflammation being one of the sources of all disease.
Mhm.
And when you're putting someone in dis-ease, they're extremely uncomfortable. And then they're going back to that amygdala. They're in the fight or flight stage, and then they're making suboptimal decisions. And it just leads them down this, excuse me, whole path of potentially destruction. It's really making choices out of fear never really lead to a fulfilling
Right.
type of life. So
Right.
it's wild how it all starts in the gut brain again. And there's something you touched on there with the neuroplasticity. I want to jump back to that. Very
Mhm.
cool. Neuroplasticity creates new pathways in the brain. I could see it very important that, people that are leaders in their space, this can be very beneficial for them as they influence people and it ripples out to them. How do you see neuroplasticity impacting leaders specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, neuroplasticity is the capacity for the brain to change and adapt. And I think, especially in the age of the internet, and now increasingly in the age of AI, the capacity to adapt to uncertainty
Mm,
and to be resilient in the face of challenge
mhm,
is one of the greatest tasks that a leader has. That
mhm.
what worked yesterday won't necessarily work today or tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think that capacity to be flexible and adaptable is central to great leadership in the 21st century and beyond. And so if you have a tool, a modality, like psychedelics or even like microdosing that helps to facilitate that adaptability,
Mhm,
then I think it makes sense to be able to use it in a really skillful way that helps you to reflect,
mhm,
learn from that reflection, grow from that reflection, and actually shift and change who you are.
mhm,
This sort of concept or idea of death and rebirth is really interesting, and there are This happens sort of on a continuum, meaning that every day it's like, what's the French word? There's a French phrase for, you would know this because you are from Montreal. What's the French word for like having an
Oh, the
orgasm?
petit mal, the little death.
Yeah, the little death,
Yeah.
right? So we talk about orgasms as being like a little death.
Mhm,
You could look at microdosing as that way too. Like
mm,
microdosing is like a little death
mhm,
where you're able to step back every day. You're able to have this aha. You're able to have these moments of deep reflection that allow you to shift and change who you are going forward.
mhm,
High doses of psychedelics, 5 grams of mushrooms, ayahuasca, 5-MeO. That's like a big death. That's
mm,
like an ego death. That's like
mhm,
a massive initiation and a massive transformative change. Um, which again, it's like a double-edged sword because that could be what is necessary for a leader. It could be they are so stuck, they are so, constipated, they just
mhm,
don't know what to do or where to go next,
mhm,
that they need that massive shift.
mhm,
The risk though is that it's so there's so much upheaval in that it actually destabilizes the company or the organization that they are leading.
mhm,
And so you have to find a balance with people who are holding responsibility, who are in positions of leadership or power, that this really big shift and change at times is necessary.
mhm,
And I think way more people would benefit if they just did low doses of psychedelics
mhm,
and they allowed it to sort of unfurl organically over time.
mhm,
Um, in fact, in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of research on what they called psycholytic therapy.
Psycholytic.
Psycholytic therapy. So the main way that we look at psychedelics today is psychedelic assisted therapy,
Mhm.
PAT. And psychedelic assisted therapy is you do a very high dose of a psychedelic. You do it once or twice, and then there's a lot of therapy before, there's a lot of therapy after,
Mm.
and the emphasis is on what they call a mystical experience. So you have this big transcendent aha experience, and there are a lot of downstream benefits from having that experience. And that research is pretty well established, and it's also really well known. When,
Mhm.
when we look at MDMA getting approved by the FDA, or psilocybin getting approved by the FDA, or LSD getting approved by the FDA, it's within that context and that model.
I see.
There's a lesser known body of research called psycholytic therapy, which is taking a low dose of a psychedelic, a microdose or a little bit more than a microdose, and doing it in conjunction with coaching or therapy.
Mhm.
And I think leaders would benefit way more if they learn how to work with these low doses of psychedelics. A lot of leaders have executive coaches or coaches that they work with,
Mhm.
and to be able to do it in conjunction with some form of coaching or therapy as part of their process of growth and
Mhm.
evolution. And I think that really needs to be the default rather than the opposite, because I think the opposite just leads oftentimes to um, too much destabilization.
Mhm.
And so there's been this, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. I don't know if you saw this thread on X, but there was a thread between like Mark Andreessen and Elon Musk.
Mm.
So Mark Andreessen started A16Z. He founded Netscape, which is the start of the internet. He's kind of like the known VC
Mm.
in Silicon Valley, and he was coming out pretty strongly against ayahuasca because you
Mm.
have all these founders who raise tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars from these big VC companies. They want to have this sort of transformative experience with ayahuasca. They go and they drink ayahuasca and they come back and they're like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. Like, I don't want to be like, I don't care about this product anymore.
Right.
Right. I want to do something else. You have these CEOs who are sort of quitting
Mhm.
their jobs, their organizations,
Mhm.
which of course, sort of hardcore capitalist VC hates that
Mhm.
because there's a bet that he's making and he's trying to get his money back plus some.
Right.
And so if you have these CEOs who are going and drinking ayahuasca and sort of totally disrupting their lives, that's not great for him. Whereas you have someone like Elon Musk, who is becoming increasingly controversial and
Mhm.
polarizing now, but we'll put that aside for a minute.
Mhm.
But who's talked openly about how ketamine has been really helpful for depression.
Mhm.
I know, it's sort of known that he's also worked with several other psychedelics, even if he doesn't openly
I
talk
could see
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
And so it's very clear that it's been very positive and beneficial for him. And Elon has, I think, the capacity to hold that and still move forward with the things that he's working on. And I think that's because the things that he's working on really matter,
Mhm.
right? There's deep purpose
Mm.
behind them. There's deep mission behind them.
Mhm.
Whereas a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs who are deciding to quit their roles as a CEO, as an example, after drinking ayahuasca, it's because they're working on a product or a mission that just there's no deeper drive there besides just making money.
Right. And when they see the ayahuasca shows them this, then there's no real unseeing it.
Yeah, there's no unseeing it. You can't go back into that because you're just going to be miserable,
Right.
or now you're aware that you're miserable,
Right.
right? And so there's often this deeper drive and purpose to pursue more meaningful work.
Right.
And so and s- and so this is going to be a big thing that we have to confront in the
Mhm.
next. I mean, we're confronting it now, but in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, you're going to have just continue to see more CEOs and more leaders work with psychedelics and plant medicine. And how do we find that middle way where
Mhm.
they can still be stewards of the companies that they have taken ownership of or are leading, but they can guide those organizations into more meaningful purposes?
Yeah, more meaningful, more consciousness, more outcomes that are beneficial for the greater good of all.
Yeah, more like I often think about it in the frame of like regeneration, right?
Mm.
Like any company we start, any mission we have should be regenerative.
Right.
It should be regenerative for individual vitality. It should be regenerative for the communities that we exist within. And it should be regenerative for the natural environment. And most business at this point in time still, I believe, is extractive.
Mhm.
And so I think that shift from extractive to regenerative is something that microdosing and psychedelics help with.
Mhm.
And making that leap into that liminal space, that space in between, that space of uncertainty,
Mhm.
is why I think coaches and practitioners are so necessary, because they need to hold these leaders as they're navigating these massive points of transition.
Mhm.
So things don't, so if things fall apart, they have the support of a coach or a practitioner to help put them back together in a way that is helpful and accretive.
Right. It's really the practitioners and the facilitators can help them become regenerative as human beings, right?
Totally.
Because it's really an inside job, and their company is just going to reflect how they really are. It's an outer manifestation of their inner world. So if they don't become regenerative, their companies will just remain extractive, right? It's really shifting the paradigm. And I remember you talked about this on the panel
Mhm.
a couple years back and used a Buckminster Fuller quote.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, that was my favorite quote at that point in time. It was basically like, "Don't fix a broken system, build a new system that makes the old one obsolete."
yeah, I
Right?
love that. Yeah. And that's really what it is about is creating a new paradigm. And neuroplasticity is doing that on the microcosm level, right?
Right.
It's and then this creates the macrocosm level with the CEOs creating regenerative conscious companies instead, and it all starts back with that. So it's what do you see as besides microdosing, which I think is the way. I think like you said, it gets them into the shallow end. You have the wingies on, the water wings, and then you have the facilitators guiding them like the swimming instructor, and then they're going into this blue ocean of regenerative conscious capitalism or conscious companies that actually make a difference, and now it's rippling out to everybody. But
Mhm.
it starts with the micro, right? It starts internally. So Paul, what do you see besides the microdosing? What are some other things that everyday people can start to do to really get them on this track to be able to be ready for whether it's the micro or going into a bit of the deeper end?
Yeah, there's tactical things, right? There's like float tanks, so people can start to do floats.
Yeah. What's the word for that? Epiogenic or do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Okay.
I mean, float tanks are also called, I'm even blanking on it now as well, but they're like they're these little, you know what they
I
are.
did one the other
Yeah.
night. It was
Yeah, they're
awesome.
like
Yeah.
egg-shaped pods. You go
Yeah.
in saline
Fantastic.
water, it's like cuts out everything else.
Desensitory. You're
Yeah,
floating in there. You have no senses, and now you drop in deep to the transcendental
yeah.
space. It's a great example.
So floats are a really great thing. I think sauna cold plunge, like
Yeah.
at a tactical level, learning how to cold plunge
Yeah.
is a really great preparation for high dose psychedelic work because for anyone who's cold plunge, even for those who have done it consistently for some time, when you get in that cold water, there's this response, and
Right.
you have to be able to actively and consciously breathe through that to downregulate the nervous system,
Mhm.
so you don't start to hyperventilate, right?
Mhm.
And it's actually a similar experience when you're taking a very high dose of a psychedelic. When the energy of that comes on, you have to learn how to quickly downregulate the breath,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so I find cold plunges in particular are a really great way to start to actively practice
Mhm.
that. How do you quickly downregulate yourself
Mhm.
if you notice that you're starting to spin or hyperventilate or like there's a lot of energy coming on?
Mhm.
Breath work is another one,
Mhm. It's great.
which there are many forms of breath work. Wim Hof is a great opener and starting point.
Love them off.
You
Yep.
know, holotropic breath work is another really great modality to work with. Um, but I think so there's like a lot of tactical things that can be done,
Mhm.
right? Breath work, cold plunges, float tanks. But I think the sort of broader lens here is it has to be something you want to do.
Mm.
So Huberman talks a lot about this when it comes to cold plunges, that there has to be willful choice involved in
Mm.
any decision that you are making to live a better life.
Mm.
So if someone is, you know, if you have a partner who's like dragging you to the sauna cold plunge
Mhm.
and you're kind of going, but you're going, you know, not really wanting to be there, the actual physiological benefits of cold plunging will be much less,
Mm.
because you're not as committed to the process of seeing it through. It's also going to be much harder unless
Mm.
you're really actively choosing to be there. And so I think this topic and concept of agency is really important. That how do we cultivate a high agency lifestyle? How do we take full responsibility for our choices and have the willingness to make the choices that we want to make to
Mm.
live a better life? And this sort of concept of high agency has become I would say, somewhat of a thing in the online sphere
Mhm.
as of late. That someone that's high agency is someone who chose to leave their hometown or even chose to leave their home country. So
Mm.
you're a great example,
Mm.
Alex. You were born in Montreal, you lived in
Mhm.
Toronto, and then you're like, I got to get out of Canada. This shit's too communist for me. And you came to the States, and now you're living the libertarian lifestyle in Austin,
God
Texas,
bless
right?
Texas, yeah.
That's a very high agency move to do. Another
Mm.
great example of someone who is high agency, I love this example, is someone who is mean to your face,
Mm.
but nice behind your back.
Huh. I love that.
So they'll tell you what you need to hear. This is also what a good friend does. They'll tell you
Yeah.
what you need to hear. They'll be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
It may be sort of confronting or difficult at times, but they're not going to gossip. They're not going to talk shit. They're only saying great things about you behind your back. And the
Mhm.
reason that the displays high agency is because the social incentives are the opposite. The social incentives are for me to be nice to you so you like me.
Right.
But then behind your back, if I talk shit about you, I talk shit about you. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And so this capacity to actually swim against the tide,
Mhm.
to swim upstream, to make choices and decisions that are actually in touch with the deepest part of who we are,
Mm.
and then to follow that thread. And that could mean to become an entrepreneur for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
That could mean to take on a meaningful mission or an impactful project. That could mean to do that in such a way where the incentive is not just financial gain, but some greater good.
Mhm.
Will have a positive ripple and impact.
Mhm.
But just as well, it could be the entrepreneur who has raised, $10 million,
Mm.
who drinks ayahuasca and then discovers that this shit's not for me. Like
Mhm.
I have no, and they go and they move to India and they meditate for 3 years. That's
Mhm.
also very high agency,
Mhm.
right? So the capacity to be and choose to be high agency,
Mhm.
to actively cultivate that as a skill and a trait, I think is one of the most beneficial things that psychedelics and these other modalities, float tanks, breath work, or whatever can facilitate, because they
Mhm.
allow you to get in touch with what it is that you want.
Mhm.
And I think what it is, we often um, ignore what we want,
Mhm.
or we often do what our parents wanted us to do, or we do what our community wants us to do, or we do what these other external sort of factors. We don't often have the courage
Mhm.
to ask the question, what is it that I want?
Mhm.
Right. And I think that ability to ask that question, and not only ask that question, but then actually do something about it
Mhm.
and pursue it with courage, is, I think, one of the greatest frames that those who are interested in personal development or leadership or medicine work or whatever it is, that is one of the biggest and most important frames that I think we can step into. Is, I think the cliche phrase right now is like, you can just do things,
Mm.
right? You can just start a company, you can just move to India, you can just, microdose, you could just, like, we forget sometimes that we make all these excuses and all these reasons for why we can't do this or why we can't make this choice or blah 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 blah, when really we have the capacity to just do things. And so I
Mhm.
think that capacity to just do things and start, is the larger frame of, okay, this is a great way to think about or work with psychedelics or breath work or float tanks or whatever it is.
Mhm. I love that, Paul. What's coming up for me is the willingness to do the thing, even if it's challenging or uncomfortable, in the name of progress for the greater good of all. Knowing that these things, if you truly look within and you desire change, you desire to make a change, or you desire the paradigm to change, it starts from within, and then getting really into or obsessed about just willingly doing it, even if it's uncomfortable. Because some of these things can be uncomfortable, especially for, the average hardworking American. But if one can get into the mindset and then start to see and feel the differences of how it viscerally feels in their body by doing the cold plunge and the sauna, and then the microdoses is it giving us the space to have the courage for the uncomfortable conversation. Then you start to get addicted to the progress.
Right.
And the progress is now putting them on a new trajectory. And it's really, and that's where it starts with the paradigm shifting. So I love that this agency. I never heard it actually put like that, and I really really like it.
Mm.
And I feel there's something very expansive in there for the human vessel on this agency of change. And I think that is a great way to, for one, to initiate this paradigm shift that we need in this new world, this new earth.
Yeah.
So
This new world.
yeah,
I like that. This regenerative,
regenerative, yeah,
mycelial.
mycelial, exactly. It's less about the extraction, which would be all about, like we touched upon, is the immediate gratification. What's in it for me? It's like, no, what's in it for we? Because if I could show up with greater capacity, I can hold the space and I could have the uncomfortable conversation and I could lead my fellow man or woman down this path as well. But it starts with from within. So I love that. Um, Something that we talked about earlier, in this spirit of this of agency and progress and modalities and biohacking, one could say these things create longevity.
Mm-hmm.
But I also heard you talk about psychedelics with longevity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a different viewpoint that I haven't heard before. So I'd like to get into that. What's your thoughts on how psychedelics play a role in longevity?
Well, I had a really great conversation about a month ago with someone who was running a regenerative medical clinic in Colorado. And it's a very expensive program. It's about $50,000 or $60,000. And it's like a sort of 1-day treatment, but then there's preparation before and after. But it's things like stem cells and exosomes and peptides and blood work, and then they're also offering on the side psychedelics, because psychedelics are legal in Colorado.
Right.
They're based in Colorado.
Yeah.
And one thing he said really stuck with me, which was, we're figuring out more and more how to help the physical body to live longer. What we don't really know yet a lot about, like we haven't had many breakthroughs yet, is on the brain, specifically degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia. Right. So he's like, this medical doctor, who I won't name yet because the research hasn't been published, but he says he's been working on some research where he's been combining therapeutic peptides, which I don't know how familiar you are.
A little bit.
Ozempic is the most famous one. A lot of people know these GLP-1 agonists as a therapeutic peptide, but there are peptides to help with
everything.
Yeah.
Literally
like
everything.
Everything.
Tanning, hormones, muscle, fat, you name it. Yeah.
Energy, sleep, immunity, everything. Brain health as well. And so he's started to combine certain therapeutic peptides with psychedelics. And he says that the synergistic impact of combining these is phenomenal.
Wow.
Right? So that's one interesting example. I think another interesting example is ibogaine.
Yeah.
Have you taken ibogaine?
I haven't.
Or worked with
I'm
ibogaine?
very intrigued, but I haven't. I've heard a lot about it, but
so ibogaine, just so your listeners have some context, ibogaine is an alkaloid from iboga. So just how psilocybin is the alkaloid in mushrooms, magic mushrooms, ibogaine is the alkaloid from iboga. Iboga is a root bark from Gabon that's been used by the Bwiti people for some time, mostly for rites of passage and initiation. But in the 1960s, it was discovered that ibogaine had an insane effect on opiate addiction, heroin addiction in particular. There were a community of people in New York who were addicted to heroin in the 60s. They somehow found out about iboga. It was like in a French pharmacy. They tried iboga. It totally cleared their heroin addiction. And then since the 60s, 70s, it's been used for opiate and heroin addiction quite a bit. In the last 5 to 6 years, though, there's been some really interesting research about its impact on TBI, traumatic brain injury. And so there's a researcher out of Stanford, Nolan Williams, who did research with Martine Polanco. Martine is a medical doctor based in San Diego who does ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT with vets. And they found that after an ibogaine treatment, that something like 90% of these participants no longer had TBI, like an insane number. TBI is normally incurable, right? And now all of a sudden you can work with ibogaine and 90% like incredible efficacy like no one had seen before. So we're seeing and noticing some interesting things with TBI and ibogaine. And the reason that's relevant is because, if we think of CTE, you're familiar with CTE.
Like concussion stuff?
Yeah. From the NFL. Right. NFL and NHL, they're not
concussion, trauma.
And you can't tell if someone has CTE until after they're dead. Right. And the hypothesis is that because there's so much head trauma with these NFL and NHL athletes, that it actually kills them.
Wow.
Whether it's through suicide or whether it's through other degenerative brain diseases. And so all of a sudden now, if you have ibogaine that can heal those brain diseases,
Wow.
and probably the best public known example is Daniel Garcia,
Right.
the
Hockey
NHL
player.
Stanley Cup champion, who has used a lot of psilocybin to heal his TBI.
Yeah.
But he's now working with a lot of professional athletes, as is Martin Polanco, the medical doctor in San Diego, ex-NFL athletes, and helping them heal this TBI, which is fantastic for brain health. The third example then is there's been some interesting case studies that are starting to come out around ibogaine and MS, multiple sclerosis. And the thing is with multiple sclerosis, with MS, what happens is as it progressively gets worse, there are lesions that form in the brain. And those lesions that form in the brain are what then lead to disabilities, physical disabilities. You can't walk really as well. You can't talk as well. And there's been just 3 or 4 months ago, there was a really interesting case study report that was published. This isn't double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, but this is a case study report where 2 individuals took ibogaine, and those 2 individuals saw a massive reduction in those brain lesions from having MS.
Wow.
Right? And so right now, I think the key to this overlap of psychedelics and longevity and how psychedelics can help us to live longer and healthier lives is how do we unlock the capacity to do way more research on substances like ibogaine and psilocybin and ayahuasca, specifically for degenerative brain diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, MS, TBI, concussions, whatever it is. And of course, the biggest restriction to that now is it's fucking expensive to do, right? Insanely expensive. Because these are Schedule I substances. And so I think it would behoove the current administration and, many of us who are in that more sort of libertarian bend have been enthusiastic about the appointment of RFK Jr. as the head of HHS.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at the time of recording this episode in mid-March 2025, there's been really no progress that we've seen or really no announcements.
Yeah.
I'm sure there will be at some point. They're probably working on things behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I think the number one thing that RFK could do is to make it way less expensive to be able to do research on Schedule I substances and then specifically start exploring what is this overlap of psychedelics and degenerative brain diseases. Because if we can unlock that and figure out modalities for that, potentially in combination with therapeutic peptides, because there's some really interesting studies that are being done in therapeutic peptides as well, then I think that we could see massive leaps in how we, like how long people can live because of the impact on brain health in particular.
That's awesome stuff, man. Well said. Very exciting. Have you ever experienced ibogaine?
No, it's like the one psychedelic that I have not done. The thing is with ibogaine is
Any interest to?
well, eventually, like finding the right place, the right team. There's a couple really great retreat centers that are in Mexico and Costa Rica. There's also a few really great clinics, but it's just, I mean, it's intense, and I would be doing it more from a, let's say, psychospiritual perspective. I don't have any killer addictions at this point in time or TBIs for that matter. And so it just hasn't, from my lens, been worth it yet because it's so intense.
Right.
But
Is the ibogaine also as like intense as, like, not iboga? I know iboga is super intense, maybe the most intense psychedelic. Is ibogaine also intense?
it would probably depend on the dosage.
Right.
I would imagine that with ibogaine as an alkaloid, you could really ratchet up the dose level to make it super intense.
Right.
Usually, though, from what I understand, the set and setting for ibogaine is going to be different than iboga. Iboga, you're going to be more like, it's going to be like a ayahuasca ceremony. I mean, not exactly like that, but it's going to be more like you'll have a shaman and you'll be in a group and
You're
they
there.
could serve the medicine, and then it's a bit more like open in that way. Whereas ibogaine is usually done like in a clinical format.
Got it.
You have an IV.
Wow.
You have something attached like to your heart in particular, because the risk with ibogaine is cardiac arrest. Like that's how intense it is. But I think 1 in 370 people die of cardiac arrest from ibogaine, which is why if someone is to do it, they really need to make sure that, like, they have a doctor there basically who runs the heart tests. Now, some of that can be mitigated. A lot of that risk can be mitigated by combining ibogaine with magnesium.
Mm.
And in fact, there's a nonprofit that's backed by Sergey Brin, the founder of Google, that is patenting this combination of ibogaine and magnesium and bringing it through clinical trials
Wow.
specifically for TBI,
Wow.
based off the research that Nolan Williams did.
Mhm.
So it's a hell of a drug, hell of a medicine.
Yeah.
And it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And I know at some point I will commit to that process, but I have not yet.
Okay, cool. Um, Shifting gears a little bit, I know we don't have a lot of time, but there's something we talked about earlier pre-filming and something I could relate to a lot too. And we touched a little bit about it with the modalities and the cold plunging and the preparing and all these things really prepare our skill level for psychedelics. And
Right.
I hear you talk about this and I could relate to this a lot, Paul. It's like once someone really gets into it, past the microdosing, they're doing these larger journeys, ceremonial doses, heroic doses. There really takes a skill set to
Mhm.
navigate these things. Like you said, it could end up being very traumatic for someone. I've had a couple really traumatic experiences too, and when my skill levels weren't really sharpened.
Right.
So let's talk about the skill levels a little bit. This is a really interesting topic for me, and
Yeah.
some things that have come up for you, and any
Yeah.
advice you want to share with anyone.
Yeah, when I think about psychedelics as a skill, and we talk a lot about this in our practitioner training program, right? This is sort of the crux of the philosophy
Hmm.
that we discuss is that there's no one size fits all with psychedelics.
Right.
There's no cookie cutter model
Right.
with psychedelics. It's not like you're going to go to a prescribing physician and they're just going to tell you like, okay, take 100 milligrams of psilocybin 3 days a week or every day for the rest of your life, like they would with Prozac or Zoloft. That's just not the case. These
Hmm.
medicines don't necessarily work like that. They have a very different interaction profile.
Hmm.
And because of that, like it's really important to understand which medicine is appropriate for where someone is at. So usually if someone is brand new to psychedelics, they've really never taken a psychedelic. Um, Maybe they have a little bit of experience. Maybe they've done a float tank or they've done a little bit of breath work. Usually my first advice is do ketamine or MDMA,
Hmm.
right? Ketamine is short. It's 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Hmm.
It's clinically approved. It's legal. It's very easy to access.
Hmm.
And for a lot of folks who are new to this, it's a great opener and introduction. MDMA, as you may know, is also it's a very loving substance, right?
Mhm.
It's a very hard opening substance. The
Mhm.
reason MAPS, which is the nonprofit that's been around for some time, the reason they chose MDMA for PTSD is because the likelihood of having a bad experience in MDMA is not high at
Right.
all, right? Like if you're in a safe setting, a quiet setting with someone you love, then you're likely going to have a really beautiful experience with
Mhm.
MDMA. It's a really, really nice heart opener. So
Mhm.
typically I say start with one of those two, or if someone is more drawn to the natural medicines or like, I don't care so much about the synthetics, I say start with a low dose of psilocybin.
Mhm.
Right. And then as we start to open our consciousness more and more and become more experienced in that way, then it might be, okay, now you may want to explore a high dose of psilocybin,
Mhm.
or now you may want to explore ayahuasca, or now you may want to explore 5-MeO DMT. So doing some of that initial work with ketamine, MDMA, microdoses or low doses of psilocybin allows you to get a sense for your inner world, your inner dialogue,
Mhm.
the terrain that you walk on or exist within, and then open that up more and more with some of these more impactful experiences. Now,
Mhm.
the risk that often people fall into when
Mhm.
they're pretty new to psychedelics is they do a lot of it,
Mhm.
right? So they get really enthusiastic about it. They start to see substantial shifts and changes. And next thing you know, they're drinking ayahuasca every weekend, right? And so I think the other aspect of this is frequency,
Mhm.
right? Like how often are you choosing to go back into the medicine?
Mhm.
And that'll depend somewhat on the medicine itself.
Mhm.
So with ketamine, the typical treatment for ketamine assisted psychotherapy is you do 6 treatments in something like 2 months,
Yeah.
because ketamine is not as intense, and then you'll have psychotherapy between those sessions as a way to sort of unpack and understand the material that's coming up. MDMA,
Mhm.
it's usually 3 sessions in 12 weeks.
Mhm.
Psilocybin, it's usually 1 or 2 sessions,
Mhm.
maybe over the span of 6 months.
Wow.
And so as you go into the more advanced medicines from ketamine to MDMA into psilocybin, potentially into ayahuasca and 5, the frequency that you use it actually should be much less,
Right.
because the hope and the intention is that when you do use it, you've done the preparation, you have a great facilitator or guide, you're drinking a lot of that medicine or taking a lot of that medicine with the focus on this sort of transcendent experience. And then like in any death and rebirth process or any high dose experience, it can take months to integrate that and unpack that. And so on the back end of a high dose experience, supporting yourself with microdosing, supporting yourself with these lower doses, not feeling necessarily compelled, like, okay, I got to take another 3 grams of mushrooms once a month, or I got to do another ayahuasca ceremony, but allowing that space to unfurl and committing to practices that help you to continue to stay in a regulated state. So meditation, breath work, sonic cold plunge, whatever. And so this sort of matrix of which medicine are you using? How often are you using that medicine? And then what other modalities are you supporting yourself with that are not drug-based? Right? Are you doing the sauna? Are you shifting your diet? Are you getting better sleep? Are you exercising more? Are you committing to some sort of contemplative practice like meditation or breath work? These non-psychedelic modalities, they're sort of like brushing your teeth every day, right? And flossing. And the high dose psychedelics are like you go to the dentist and you get a really deep clean, right? And so that's another good metaphor, another way to think about this, the skill of psychedelics. Then ideally, right, this cultivating the skill of psychedelics should allow you to be a better, I kind of come back to agency, allow you to have more agency, allow you to be a better creator, to be a better manifester, because all of a sudden you have the power and the capacity to get clear on what it is that you want and choose that. And so a lot of what psychedelics do is they remind us or help us to remember our sovereignty or divinity. And once we're in that center, then the choices and the decisions we make from that will be much more authentic to our true self, right? And once they're more authentic to that true self, that's when these doors really open for true creation and manifestation, because everything then is just flowing from something beyond us.
Love that, Paul. Well said.
Yeah.
We got time for one more question? Or?
For sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. What's your current relationship like with mushrooms specifically?
That's a great question. Psychedelic or functional or everything, oyster, shiitake.
Let's go with psychedelic and in general, psychedelic mushrooms.
So about a year and a half ago, I did my first dieta with ayahuasca. And a dieta is a tightly held container. Right? You go into the jungle, you're by yourself in isolation. You don't talk. You eat maybe 1 meal a day, and you drink a lot of ayahuasca, and you diet a specific plant. So the plant that I dieted was something called guayusa.
Cool.
And I was in isolation for about 10 days, and you do 5 ayahuasca ceremonies that. And the intention is to develop a relationship with guayusa, with this plant. After that dieta, I came back and, every now and then I would work with mushrooms, and it just ended up causing this, like, anytime I eat a mushroom chocolate now in particular, I've noticed I get really bad gut stuff.
I've heard that a lot.
Really painful gut stuff. So when I work with mushrooms now, I lemon tech it.
Yeah, nice.
And I either microdose. I don't really need to lemon tech it with microdose, but I microdose the psilocybin every now and then. My current protocol is more with LSD. I prefer LSD.
Cool.
But I microdose with psilocybin every now and then, or I'll do slightly higher doses, like a 0.5 gram to 1 gram, and combine it with maybe some form of breath work as a way to have sort of emotional release or catharsis. Like if I feel like I'm a little emotionally constipated and just stuck, like I have some energy stuck that hasn't fully flown through, I might do a 0.5 gram to 1 gram, open that up and allow some things to move: grief, anger, sadness, whatever needs to get out. And then as part of our practitioner training program, we have a retreat in Costa Rica every 4 months. And so I will guide and facilitate a high dose psilocybin journey in concert with a number of other facilitators. So we'll have 30 or 35 people, and we'll guide them through 3 to 4 to 5 grams of psilocybin with music, and sort of facilitate this really beautiful experience and journey for them. So my own personal work, more like microdose to mini dose. I've done my fair share of high doses of mushrooms. And I appreciate it, but a lot of my high dose work has been more with ayahuasca as of late. And then I will do some facilitation work in concert with other facilitators for the intensive. And mushrooms for me are like they kind of like clean out the garbage,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Mm-hmm.
LSD is something that it's more inspiring and motivating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms, they're inspiring and motivating, but in a different way.
Sure.
It's more by like subtraction rather than addition.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they just, when they get in there
Yeah.
and they know the thing to get at and they know the thing to open up and to clear.
Yeah. They deconstruct.
Totally. And so
Yeah.
when I come out of these experiences with psilocybin, they're at times very challenging. They're not
Mhm.
always the most
Enjoyable.
enjoyable, but they're very clearing.
Yes.
And I get a lot of clarity and knowing from it. And that's been, instrumental in my path, like so instrumental.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. LSD, also probably my favorite technology ever.
Yeah.
Do you know like different strains of LSD? Have you gotten into this? I don't know if strains is the right word, but
Yeah, it's funny because you're like the second person to ask me this today, and we're recording this at, I don't know, 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And you're like the fifth or sixth person to ask me this in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So there's LSD 25. That's the original LSD that Sandoz, that Albert Hoffman created and
Cool.
Sandoz created, LSD 25. And then you have supposedly other forms of LSD, like orange sunshine.
Right. White
It's
fluff.
a good example. White fluff.
Yeah.
Oh, you know white fluff.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alex knows white fluff. We must have the same person. There's Owsley. Owsley was the kind of producer for the Grateful Dead. He had his own LSD that he created, right? So you have these different strains. And look, I'm a, like, I would consider myself to be like an LSD connoisseur. Like I love LSD. I love to explore. The family's another one that makes great LSD. I don't notice that much of a difference between the different strains.
Okay.
Not like I do with mushrooms.
Right.
When I take Ghost versus Golden Teachers, you can tell.
Big difference. Yeah.
Or Tidal Wave or Cambodians or Be Positive, right? Like I can tell with those different strains. With LSD, I can't as much.
Yeah.
I just look at LSD, like the way that I think about LSD energetically, it's like the crystal of love. And so just like when you're choosing, like mushrooms have a certain intelligence, ayahuasca has a certain intelligence, iboga or ibogaine has a certain intelligence. I also think LSD has a certain intelligence, and the intelligence I get from it is just like pure sort of love, unconditional love.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's like love in a crystallized form. Like I'm bringing a crystal into my body.
I love that.
Whenever I'm taking it. And a lot of people they're scared of LSD, or they never done it because they're worried about it. And typically what I say to people is, look, a high dose of LSD is great, like 100 micrograms, which is like a tab or two, phenomenal. But just do like 10 micrograms or 20 micrograms. And doing these low doses, it's like people notice immediately a shift in vitality and energy. Right?
Yeah.
It's an incredible technology.
Incredible technology, remarkable. I'd love to try the orange sunshine at some point. I don't think I've tried that one.
Yeah.
But I know we're running low on time here, Paul. One last question to bring us home. I know you as well as I have been through a lot in the last couple of years, personally, relationship-wise, business-wise, all this kind of stuff. What's one lesson or code that you've learned, that you've embodied, that you can share with the audience that's really made an impact in your life, that they can possibly grasp and use that to shift their paradigm?
Good question. For what I come back to often is like there's medicine in community. And as entrepreneurs, we often feel like lone wolves, or I often feel like a lone wolf. And the ability to remember to sort of open up to the support systems that surround us, and to lean into those and to be held by those, I think can go a very long way on this path, right? When things are challenging, when things are difficult, when times are uncertain, having family and friends and sort of a broader community that you can lean on and lean into, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, well said. Community is the new currency, and to be really vulnerable in those times when the chips are low and be held by community, you really see the power of it, and that's where real transformation could take place. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being on here today. You're a plethora of knowledge, and I'm very grateful for you and all the work and service that you're doing in this space. And I wish you 100 years of success and bridging this gap for everybody. Such a valuable mission. So thank you for being here, Paul. Anybody that wants to work with you or tap into your groups or things, where should they go?
Thethirdwave.co. Thethirdwave.co. You could also just search Third Wave Microdosing or Third Wave Paul Austin.
Cool.
And everything is.
We'll put it in
there.
the notes as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Thank
It
you.
was a fun conversation, and I'm looking forward to when we get to flip it around and
We'll do it again.
I get to interview you. That'll be fun.
I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you, Paul.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you.